Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynn Fuchs. I'm a professor at Vanderbilt University, and I'm an Institute Fellow at the American Institutes for Research. The title of my talk today is Strategies for Differentiating Instruction for Diverse Learners. In this session, I'm going to talk about what differentiated instruction is. I'll provide a rationale for having a strong focus on differentiated instruction in the post-pandemic era. And I'll talk about strategies for differentiating instruction in kindergarten through third grade classrooms. With differentiated instruction, teachers adapt instruction to meet the specific needs of every student in their class. Differentiated instruction is a framework that encompasses a variety of evidence-based strategies. It's not a single strategy or product. And differentiated instructions involves two major kinds of classroom activities. It involves whole class instruction, and it can be conducted as specialized classroom routines that permit students to work productively at the same time on different topics or different levels, or on the same topic and level in different ways. So multiple reports indicate mathematics performance in the wake of the pandemic is weaker than in prior years, and that equity gaps have widened. We've all heard about these disappointing and concerning results. Learning loss is a particularly acute problem for students in high poverty elementary schools, for students who were low achieving prior to the pandemic, and for students in the elementary grades. And learning loss is even more severe for students with learning disabilities. For all these reasons, and especially for these populations, we need to make sure that we address important grade level content, even as we find ways to address unfinished learning that occurred because of the pandemic. And reports converge on the finding that the pandemic's effects on student learning are stronger in math than in reading. So to combat math learning loss and the disparities emanating from the pandemic, classroom teachers, as I said, need to use strategies to accelerate math learning on grade level content, even as you're providing and addressing math content from prior grade levels that students have not fully mastered. So as I said, I'm going to talk about two major activities when classroom teachers at the primary grades can incorporate differentiated instruction. First, I'll talk about teacher-led whole class instruction. So whole class instruction is a mainstay of classroom teaching and learning. And with whole class instructional differentiation, teachers vary instructional supports and structure to create comparable levels of challenge for students who are operating at different levels of readiness. This can be accomplished in a variety of ways. During teacher-led whole class instruction, teachers adapt mathematical explanations and demonstrations and provide necessary supports and representations to reach all of their students. But they can also follow up whole class lessons immediately with activities and work assignments that differ in complexity, depth of information, or level of abstraction to address students with different levels of readiness. This includes, for example, problem sets on the same topic or requiring the same skills, but using different numbers. Some assignments have easier numbers in them. Some assignments have harder numbers. Different levels and types of representations of mathematical ideas that can support different students in different ways. Some students may be using blocks to represent addition. Some children may be using visual representation to show parts being brought together into a whole for addition. And differentiation can also help teachers cover foundational skills that students need to work on in order to support the grade level content, or support extensions for students who are at the higher end of the performance continuum. So using follow-up activities that immediately follow a whole class presentation can help teachers differentiate the kinds of content and follow activities that follow a whole class lesson. Some teachers differentiate their instruction following a whole class lesson with peer-mediated small group or paired activities rather than individual assignments. These groups and pairs are structured to help students work together on guided rehearsal and practice related to the content of the teacher's whole class lesson. And these small groups and pairs work together sometimes on different activities and sometimes on the same activities, but with modifications in the materials, assignments, or activities that support the whole class content. The small group and paired activities can provide opportunities for children to construct and practice mathematical explanations, solution strategies, and procedures the teacher addressed during whole class lessons. And research shows that peer-mediated small group and paired interactions are most productive when each grouping or pairing includes higher and lower performing students working together, and when the activities are structured in ways that require all students to engage and work together constructively. But there are also ways of building specialized classroom routines that help a classroom efficiently and productively engage in differentiated instruction. Specialized classroom instructional differentiation routines include teacher-led small group instruction, learning centers, computer-assisted instruction, and class-wide paired tutoring. These routines can be used during follow-up whole class lessons with all students, groups, or pairs working on the same math topic, or they can be used to supplement the core math program with different students, groups, or pairs working on different math topics. These specialized routines offer an important tool for addressing unfinished learning on foundational skills, sometimes on the grade level content, but sometimes on out of grade level content. So teachers can adopt one or more specialized routines for instructional differentiation in their classroom. We recommend deciding at the start of the year which routines to incorporate and conduct training on so that your students know how to participate in each routine. This increases the likelihood that the routine will be used productively by the students to support learning. If you're planning on using multiple routines, using small groups to work cooperatively and using learning centers or whatever combination of specialized classroom routines you're thinking about, I suggest providing time, introducing one of those routines at a time. Introduce each one, train the class on that one specialized routine, then provide time for practice in the children implementing that routine before you introduce the next routine. And while you're teaching routines, you need to cover the rules for engagement while the routine is being conducted. So children need to be taught the rules for and practice in moving efficiently and quietly from their desks to tables, to small groups, or to instructional centers, or to computers, or to their partners. In order for these routines to be smoothly functioning, figure out a way to get children to move to their new placement in the classroom that supports the specialized routine you're implementing. Use posters to show students what their assignments are, which group they're in, which sequence of centers they'll go to, what their computer assignments are, which pairs they're working as part of. Assignments or the same posters specify which children move and which children stay in place. The rules of engagement and practice include using quiet voices, talking only about math, paying careful attention when other students take turns completing problems or explaining their work. And there are guidelines for children to interact in a supportive manner that support fellow students. Children need to be taught how and why children improve in math when they help other students learn math topics, even though the explainer already knows how to do the problem. They need to learn how to ask fellow students for help. They need to know how to offer help to fellow students. They need to know how to provide corrections for errors or misconceptions in supportive ways. And they need to be taught strategies for providing good, strong explanations. Teacher-led small groups address the same skill. Teacher-led small groups is one form of specialized adaptation for a routine to teacher class. Teacher-led small groups address the same skill for all students in the group. These groups usually address foundational skills, but they can sometimes also be used for extension learning. The teacher teaches the class on the teacher-led small group routine as with any other instructional differentiation routine. So the teacher teaches the class that they will announce when it's time for small group instruction. That means children look at the poster to see if they're going to be in that teacher-led small group lesson. If so, they walk quietly to the teacher-led lesson table. And if not, they know from the poster what assignment they need to complete as they work quietly while the teacher is providing the small group lesson to several students. Class-wide peer tutoring is another form of specialized classroom routine to support instructional differentiation. With class-wide paired tutoring, always include a higher and a lower performing student in every pair. Higher and lower performing students benefit alike because teaching another person deepens the teacher's own understanding. And paired learning permits the highest level of instructional intensification because both children are always engaged. And when you do class-wide peer tutoring, reconfigure pairs on a regular basis, and that will increase, research shows, will increase children's social networks in the classroom. And use assessment data to create groupings and pairings when you're assigning topics for instructional differentiation. Because student skill strategies change over time, teachers need ongoing assessment to make sound instructional differentiation decisions, and many schools provide teachers with periodic interim assessment reports that can be used to configure groups and pairs for activity work following whole class lesson. Interim assessment reports can also be used within specialized differentiation for creating teacher-led small groups, for creating pairs for class-wide pair tutoring, for assigning topics for teacher-led small groups, assigning topics within class-wide pair tutoring, for assigning computer topics, and for making center assignments. And if interim assessments are not available to you, you can consider using your progress monitoring data, your unit tests from your curriculum, or your work samples from your classroom assignments. So here's an evidence-based strategy for creating tutoring pairs for differentiated instruction. Here I just listed 16 students to show a class. Obviously, the vast majority of classrooms are going to have more than 16 students, but this just illustrates the pairing procedure. So the teacher begins by forming the first 3 pairs, which involves matching the highest with the lowest performing math students in the class. So this list is rank ordered from the highest performing student in the class to the lowest performing, and the teacher has gotten this ranking from her most recent interim assessment. She takes the highest performing student and the lowest performing student and pairs those students together. And she does that for her first 3 pairs. Then she takes the list of green students who are the top half of the remaining students, and she pairs those students with the top half, with the lower performing remaining students to make the next set of pairs. What this accomplishes is that there's always a higher and a lower performing student in each pair. And we've created, with the first 3 pairs, we've created a situation where the lowest performing students have the highest performing students to create strong mathematical explanations for them. And the highest performing students benefit as well because they have the greatest challenge for creating strong explanations. So an example of an evidence-based class-wide pair tutoring system at kindergarten and first grade. In a series of lessons with all pairs working on the same math topics, teachers train students in the structure for conducting this specialized instructional differentiation routine, which involves peer-mediated activities. After the teacher has completed her lessons, training the class to work productively together for class-wide pair tutoring, the first session of every week begins with a brief teacher-led whole class lesson where the teacher explains the math topic for that week and explains how to do that week's peer-mediated activity. Then students, after that brief lesson, get into their pairs. They look at the poster, they find who their pairs are for the week, and they get into pairs. And they use the rules they've been taught to work productively for the paired segment of that day's specialized instructional differentiation. Now, the topic for each pair addresses the needs of the lower performing student in that pair. So even though they're working on the same topic, pairs may work on the same activity, but the numerals are going to be different. So for students who are in those first three pairs where we have the three lowest performing students in the class, the teacher might use numerals from 0 to 9, whereas the other pairs in the class are going to be using 0 to 20. Another example to differentiate the follow-up activities in those pairs is for some pairs to work with concrete representations, while others are only working with the symbolic numbers. And some class-wide tutoring systems come with a library of activity sheets that helps teachers structure the peer-mediated activities. And I'll show you a few examples of that now at kindergarten and first grade. So at kindergarten and grade 1, this is an example. This example uses game boards to structure activities and interactions. A teacher-led lesson introduces the game board for the week. In the teacher-directed lesson, the game board is shown as a poster. And when students move into pairs, they have a smaller game board that the pair is sharing. And the game board is the material they're using to complete the activity. And on the game board, it will show smiley faces, which tells the students when to give each other a smiley face that show that they're doing a good job. And the game boards always also show flags that show students when it's time to switch roles, because in every peer-mediated session, the students are going to switch roles with one student asking the questions and providing corrections, and the other student providing answers. So here we see a simple kindergarten game board where one of the children is saying what number, and the other student is showing fingers to identify how many. So 5, and then the student shows 5. What number? 4. What number? 8. What number? 0, and so forth. And when the students get to the flag, the children switch roles. And so now the second student is asking the numbers, and the other one is showing the fingers and saying the numeral name. Here's another example from kindergarten where the coach who's asking the question says what number, and the player who's doing the math activity is placing a clothespin on a number line to show where on a number line 12 goes. And then the student who's asking the question says, what number is 1 more? And there's an answer. And what number is 1 less? And the children proceed, switch roles every row on this game board. Here's a first grade example, the same sort of thing. Here, the children are working cooperatively with each other on word problems. And here, the students are working on 2-digit numerals and representations of those. Second and third grade, we have a similar structure. And here, students are using materials where they're asking each other questions, and they're proceeding halfway through the worksheet. Then they switch roles, and there's a structure by which students are taught to work together. And the coach is using a question sheet and providing corrections, and the students are generating explanations and discussion. And for this skill, they're adding with regrouping. And here we have clock reading, and we have a library of topics that the teacher can use during class-wide peer tutoring to differentiate what topics she wants different pairs to work on. So a few general ideas about instructional differentiation. Using assessment data to assign topics is important so that you are engaging students all at the level of their level of readiness, creating a challenge for them, but addressing a combination of unfinished learning as well as grade level topics in different ways for different groups or pairs or students. And I recommend using a behavior management system within differentiated instruction. This means incorporating a behavior management system to ensure engagement and motivation to persevere in the face of challenge and hard work during differentiated activities. And this works best when the instructional differentiation routines are aligned with whatever your general classroom behavior management system is throughout the day. And the behavior management system should award points when the class or when specific children follow rules, the expectation the teacher has taught for that specialized routine, follow the procedures the teacher established for the specialized routine, follow established routines efficiently and quietly. When students provide each other quality math explanations and ask each other for help, when they produce strong work, and when they achieve their goals. And in the spirit of instructional differentiation, there often within a class is a child or two who requires some differentiation in the very behavior management system that's being used in the classroom. So they may need more structure or maybe a more immediate reinforcement for doing a good job. As you get started with instructional differentiation, I'll repeat some ideas. Begin by teaching your class one specialized instructional differentiation routine at a time. Use that routine at least twice weekly so students remain competent with the routine that you've taught them. And use the routine to consolidate student performance on grade level topics, even as you address unfinished learning. And then incorporate that routine as a follow-up to your whole class teacher-led instruction to provide rehearsal and practice to students in differentiated ways. And once you have one specialized instructional routine operating in your classroom, consider gradually increasing the number of specialized routines you'll use, and consider getting help from professional development sources that may be available. So you're welcome to contact me, and I'll be glad to answer questions that you have. Hi, everyone. I hope you found that information helpful, and I'm glad to answer any questions you have. My understanding is that you can speak them, or you can put them in the chat. As you enter questions, I'll try my best to get you the information you need.
Are there particular strategies you've found to be good starting points? They are a lower lift for students and or teachers. So I think that the kinds of peer tutoring activities I focused a lot of attention on in this talk do require a level of preparation on the part of the teacher. I think that one way to go as you initially introduce your instructional differentiation routines is to think about how you use small group instruction in your class and how to optimize its smooth operation in terms of keeping everyone in the class engaged in useful activities while you're working with a single group. I also think it's an easier lift to think about using materials that you covered during whole class instruction for follow-up peer-mediated activities so that children are using either the very materials you went over with the whole class one-to-one now and generating questions and answers for each other in pairs concerning the strategy or math idea you just taught, so that there's less material preparation. But even when, at any time that you're using peer-mediated instruction, it's a very important principle is to have a higher and lower performing student in every pair. Thanks, everybody.